After reviewing the features and game modes in EA Sports WRC, it's time to do the same for the actual driving experience. Again, EA was kind enough allowing me access to the review build of the game so I can give you guys my thoughts straight away, something which is much appreciated of course. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Sim and welcome to simracing. In today's video I'll share my thoughts on the driving experience in EA Sports WRC, focusing on graphics, locations and stages, cars, sound, force feedback and of course the handling and physics model. Let's not beat around the bush and get straight to business. When it comes to graphics, I'm going to look at them from two different angles. First I'll talk about the graphical quality, followed by its performance. Now I know people have been rather displeased with the quality despite the game being a next gen title only, some even claiming WRC Generations looks better, something I completely disagree with. There are videos out there with side by sides and it's clear as daylight EA Sports WRC looks better. That being said, personally I expected a bigger jump in quality as well, and in many ways I actually prefer the look of Dirt Rally 2.0, however that doesn't mean the game looks bad though. So when it comes to the next gen only decision, there is something people need to realize. The main reason the developers designed WRC for next gen only was not to give us the most stunningly beautiful realistic rally title, but rather to allow us, the players, to enjoy the incredibly vast and massive environments they've created. Senior creative director Ross Gowing said in an interview that they couldn't make these huge environments run smoothly on the previous gen consoles, their technology simply can't cope with it. Something else you need to remember is the fact that this is the first time the development team designed a game using the Unreal Engine. Yes, they obviously acquired people that have experience with the game engine, but it still takes time for the whole team to get to grips with it. And for the first attempt, I think they did a very decent job. The dust particles and clouds in particular are one of my favorite things. I continue being mesmerized by dust getting kicked to the side by the tires and how that cloud forms and disappears, especially when it goes over the edge of a cliff. Just beautiful. Now it hasn't been officially confirmed by the developers, but as far as I can tell they are using Unreal Engine 4. I would expect that their plan is to eventually move on to Unreal Engine 5, which should bump up the quality quite significantly. So I think the graphical quality doesn't really impact my driving experience in a negative way, however it doesn't enhance it much either. There are three elements I do want to mention which bug me a bit though. Number one, the default brightness works well for most weather conditions, but I and many of you prefer driving in clear conditions during the afternoon. In that circumstance, everything is overly bright when you sit behind the wheel. What I did was turn the brightness down to 30. It's a nice balance for both clear and very cloudy conditions. Number 2, there are moments where I pause the replay and notice that the quality of certain assets is significantly lower than others, all in the same shot. In majority of cases it comes down to the grass assets, they don't always blend in well with the rest. In some cases they aren't even connected to the surface. This in particular isn't just the case for plants but also certain cars, especially on tarmac. That really needs to be sorted out ASAP. Now it's merely visual as you don't feel that disconnect when you are driving, which is something I'll get back to in the handling and physics section of the video obviously. And number 3, the raindrops and snowflakes do need some extra work. Snowflakes look decent enough when they fall, but the raindrops are too pronounced. They also don't interact with other objects in the environment. Once they hit the car or the ground for example, they simply vanish. So as I said before, it's not bad, but neither does it give you that wow effect. The second angle I'm looking at when it comes to the graphics is its performance. I have read countless posts and reactions of people having huge issues in that regard, which is truly unfortunate. However, it's not uncommon nowadays for games to have these performance issues at launch. It's actually become a bit of a standard in the gaming industry to be honest, which is not good. Not good at all. Now the development team is hard at work putting together the day 1/week 1 patch to further optimize the game and fix a number of impactful bugs. It might already be out by the time this video is actually uploaded. They will also continue doing that afterwards because they want all players to have a smooth run as it were. I wish everyone could experience the same level of enjoyment I'm experiencing because on my PC the game is running very well on mainly ultra settings. I'm still in the process of fine tuning them though. And yes, I do have the occasional stutter or frame rate drop, but it honestly doesn't affect my driving experience. For those that are interested, I have released a video last week where I show my graphical settings and how the game performs using them, which actually helped out some of you. Link is in the description below. The locations and stages is one of EA Sports WRC's major selling points, and for good reason. We can compete at 17 different rally events, each having their own unique flavour, with another one, the Central European Rally, coming in a free post-launch update. 2 events are on snow, 6 including the Central European Rally are on tarmac, and then we have 10 gravel events. All the stages themselves are based on real-life roads, with the majority being 1-to-1 recreations of stages that are or have been used during actual WRC events. That's something which enhances the driving experience massively for me personally. I can basically watch onboard footage of Calero Vampero driving La Baleine Visibi at Monte Carlo and then jump into the game and drive his car on the exact same stage. Each of the locations and stages also captures the real world ones phenomenally well. Furthermore, I've already mentioned that the game has massive environments, and that's because there are some really long stages for us to tackle. I mean, having the option to drive a stage which is a smidge under 35 kilometers is properly mental. I've already tried some of them out, including the one at Chile, which took me over 26 minutes in a Rally 1 car to complete. Imagine how long it would take in the plucky little Vauxhall Nova. Aside from the scale and variety of locations and stages, you also have the option to select which of the 4 seasons you want to drive in, each having their own aesthetic impact. Then there are the various weather conditions you can pick from, as well as the time of day. We already had different weather and time of day in Dirt Rally 2.0, but for EA Sports WRC they have almost doubled the amount of options. And if that wasn't enough, we get to play with the various levels of surface degradation too. I've had quite a few people tell me that the roads are pretty flat, especially on gravel events. My responding question is always, are you mainly playing on time trial mode? For which the answer usually is yes. After suggesting they should jump into quick play solo mode instead and set the surface degradation at maximum, I often receive a message saying, thanks mate, it's much nicer now. So for those of you who stick with time trial mode, I would recommend going to quick play solo instead and crank that surface deck all the way up. EA Sports WRC has 78 cars spanning the different eras of the WRC, from the classic 60s rally cars like the Mini Cooper S to the Group B monsters of yesteryear, the screaming F2 kit cars, the current Rally 1 hybrid cars, and much more. We get a variety of front, rear and four-wheel drive cars, each having highly detailed 3D models. You can get behind the wheel of iconic machinery such as the Peugeot 205 T16 Group B and the Citroën Zara WRC, or go for some hidden gems like the Vauxhall Nova and the Mitsubishi Galant VR4. I truly applaud the developers for the car roster they put together. Aside from the real cars, we can also build our own Rally 3, Rally 2 or Rally 1 car using the builder mode. Even though it's a nice feature to have, for me it's a bit too limited in the customization department. Again, if you want to learn more about that, check out my video on the game modes and features from last week. Now, people have been complaining somewhat when it comes to the damage model. The thing is, EA Sports WRC is an officially licensed product, which means that they are limited to how far they can actually go with certain aspects, one being the damage model. The developers had to come to an agreement with various license holders such as the official WRC teams regarding the level of damage that is allowed in the game. Some are more lenient than others, which is why certain cars can be damaged more severely than others in terms of the body panels. So the damage model isn't going to be realistic for many of them, but in no way should we blame the developers for that. On the mechanical side of things, it's a different story. Regardless of whether you have hardcore damage mode on or off, your car will suffer mechanically, and in many cases you won't be able to sort everything out at service during events. That for me does add an extra layer of immersion and enhances the driving experience. The sound is another facet where EA Sports WRC shines very bright. We all know that the team has some truly talented sound engineers working on the game, and they have not disappointed at all. A large number of cars have incredibly realistic engine and exhaust audio, to the point some are difficult to distinguish from their real life counterpart. Now there are cars they haven't yet recorded in real life, such as the Skoda Fabia WRC or the Citroën C3 Rally 2 for example, as you can hear yourself. However, they do have audio that captures the essence of a rally car and doesn't sound like some sort of vacuum cleaner mixtape. Aside from the car audio, we also need to listen to various effects like tire squeal on tarmac, the sound of sliding on gravel, driving on a flat tire, or even the ambient audio. And in the vast majority of cases they've done a really good job. The sound as well as the visuals, come to remember it, when going through a water splash are somewhat wonky though. All things considered, the sound design for EA Sports WRC is very much on point and massively improves the level of immersion. The force feedback in my humble opinion has definitely been improved, especially on tarmac. Just to clarify, I am using a Thrustmaster TSPC racer, so the feedback is mainly based on my experience with that particular wheelbase. And from what I've heard from others, it's good to even grade on their equipment as well. Now the default settings are a good starting point, but I did adjust them to suit my personal preference, as you can see for yourself. So focusing on tarmac feedback first, there is more weight to it in general, which is good. It allows you to better experience the car's weight shifting compared to Dirt Rally 2.0. You can also feel the wheel go lighter when the tires lose grip, for example when going onto the grass whilst cutting a corner. Other rumble effects coming from the surface itself are definitely present but not overdone. Some people would rather prefer more, but I think it's nicely balanced. You do feel more coming through the wheel if you cut corners and go onto gravelly bits or drive over a cobblestone surface. On snow the feeling might also feel rather lifeless to some of you. However, I don't know how it feels to drive a rally car with studs on roads such as these, so I couldn't say how it should be. When driving on gravel it's really good. Again, some aren't convinced, which could be due to spending most if not all their time in time trial mode, but going into quick play solo and adding rougher surface degradation should transform your experience, as was the case for me. There's far more detailed feedback coming through the wheel compared to what we had in Dirt Rally 2.0, so a job well done in my book. And now the big one, the handling and physics model. As was expected, the player base is pretty much divided. Some say it's terrible, some say it's brilliant. At times people even share the reason as to why from their perspective. However, in many cases it just ends up being a shouting match which no longer focuses on the actual topic. You have probably come across posts or comments saying it's easy and they went arcade to cater for the masses, Dirt Rally 2.0 is so much better, WRC Generations is so much better, or no surprise, RBR is still the king of course. Seems like some things never change, right? But what does an insignificant YouTuber like myself who loves simulation and rally/racing games think? Well, overall it's pretty good. It certainly has a very strong foundation to build on. I am of the opinion that it's definitely better than WRC Generations and has Dirt Rally 2.0 beaten as well. The highly modded Richard Burns Rally is still a cut above the rest, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Those modders are free to go as extreme and as detailed as they want, having all the time in the world to accomplish it. Game development studios on the other hand are businesses that need to release products and create revenue from them, preferably as much as possible. Building a hardcore ultra-realistic rally game is just not a viable business venture. What does sell is a game which gives players the best rally experience possible, which is different and something they've accomplished in my mind. In general, the different car classes and even cars within have their unique flavor. As an example, the Puma Rally 1 feels a bit more sluggish than the Yaris Rally 1, something I've noticed in real life as well as when watching footage online. I do want to mention that I always adjust certain aspects of the default car setups. Usually I increase the braking force by a handful of clicks, almost max out the handbrake force and adjust the rear diff so the car doesn't brake out so violently. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty stuff. The overall grip level of the cars is better than it was in Dirt Rally 2.0, which is the game I'll be comparing it to the most, as this is its predecessor. There are specific situations I'll address later on where things aren't hitting the spot though. Also, the following points I'm going to raise are primarily for driving in dry conditions. I'll get into the other conditions afterwards, so keep that in mind. On gravel you no longer have the same high level of traction. It feels a lot closer to what I think it would be in real life. The nuances which come with the improved surface deck also play a role. Staying in those ruts gives you better traction as it should. Going on the loose stuff lowers traction. Jumping in and out of them all the time makes the car unpredictable, again, as it should. Now, I haven't driven too much on snow yet, but from my limited in-game experience I think they may have moved a bit too far away from what they had in Dirt Rally 2.0. Having said that, I honestly don't know how it should be when driving a rally car on snow with studs. On tarmac is where I found the most improvements. You no longer have that glider feeling from Dirt Rally 2.0, particularly when going through corners. The cars feel a lot more planted, and in combination with the improved force feedback, you have a far better idea of what the wheels are doing. There's also the addition of a slip threshold which feels very natural. When you overload the tires in high speed corners for example, there is that moment when you feel the tires gradually lose traction, just like in real life. In situations where you go onto the grass to cut corners, you can feel the car moving underneath you as well. One more element which I find interesting is in regards to the hybrid boost system for Rally 1s. At first on tarmac I went straight for the aggressive setup, however I quickly realized that I was losing a lot of time on tighter corners such as hairpins. When pulling the handbrake I just floored the throttle, which enabled the boost if it was available. At least half of my boost was basically wasted on spinning out the tires rather than providing extra forward momentum. So I changed my approach in similar situations by selecting the cautious boost setup and better managing my throttle input in order not to exceed the 70% throttle threshold, which is when the boost is enabled with the cautious setup. This made me go around hairpins, for example, more smoothly and use the boost session more effectively. I suspect many of you haven't fully realized this aspect of the physics yet. It'll be interesting to see which strategy players will go with in competitions. Now everything I've mentioned so far is very positive, but there are some areas that need additional work. It's been pointed out countless times by myself and others that there is a problem with traction loss and gain, especially in tight slow speed corners. Some claiming that to be the main reason the handling is complete garbage, despite it being just one aspect of the whole physics model. Right, so the issue here is that tires regain traction far too quickly and aggressively, which is most noticeable in situations where the handbrake is applied. For the four-wheel drive cars it's not ideal but manageable to a certain extent. However, with front-wheel drive and especially rear-wheel drive cars it's a real problem. When you pull the handbrake you'd expect to be able to do this. But what happens in EA Sports WRC is the following.
40, 6 right, 30, early 2 left, opens long.
It is simply impossible to play with the throttle and guide the car through the hairpin in a nicely controlled slide. As far as I'm aware, this is due to the way torque-based slip is implemented in the physics model. If the developers could improve that one specific element in a way so that the car gradually loses and regains traction based on the amount of torque, the model would already be in a much better place. It wouldn't just improve the specific situation I just pointed out, but also have an effect on driving in wet conditions. The tires regain traction too quickly as well when throttling out of corners in very wet conditions, especially in cars that are not Rally 3, Rally 2 or Rally 1s. So by adjusting torque-based slip, the devs would be hitting two birds with one stone. There is one more element regarding traction I want to point out, which is more or less for one specific location, Monte Carlo. What was fantastic in Dirt Rally 2.0 is the different levels of traction you had on roads that were partly covered in snow and ice. For EA Sports WRC, the difference in traction between tarmac and snow is very minimal. This is how I expect the car to react. And that's how the car actually behaves in game.
Right, tightens half long. 90. Slight left to 5 right short, 60.
So one of the great challenges from Dirt Rally 2.0 is no longer there, which is a massive shame. I absolutely loved that back in the day. It was so great to start the long stages on slicks and go up to the top, maneuvering between those ice patches and wrestling with the car when there was no way of avoiding them. The final point I want to address has to do with suspension. This one also comes up very often when people claim that EA Sports WRC is an arcade game and easy to play, but that's going a bit too far in my opinion. The suspension is indeed somewhat too forgiving, as I've mentioned in the past. However, I think it's actually not that far off for the Rally 3, Rally 2 and Rally 1 cars. Seeing firsthand how they can absorb impacts from jumps, for example, is pretty impressive. Nevertheless, in reality the older historic cars didn't have such sophisticated suspension. It's not as forgiving in game as is the case for the three car classes I pointed out, but it does lean more towards the suspension of modern cars rather than how they were or are in real life. At least that's what I suspect. Can't say if it's actually true or not because I haven't had the privilege to get behind the wheel of such cars in the real world. Now I do want to mention that Unreal Engine 4 is a game engine which is known for being terrible at replicating suspension in racing games. I'm convinced the team had to go to extreme lengths in order to make it work with the game engine, probably designing completely new aspects specifically for it, facets that didn't even exist yet for Unreal Engine 4. So to summarize the handling and physics model, the foundation is definitely there. All they would need to do in the future from my perspective is work on the two main points of critique, the suspension and the torque-based slip aspect. If they can get those to a more authentic representation, the handling and physics model would be pretty spot on. Right, that leads me to the closing bit of the video about the driving experience in EA Sports WRC. Overall, the game provides an amazing rally driving experience thanks to the combination of great stages and locations, a fantastic car list, phenomenal sound design, okay graphics, and a handling model with very strong foundations. Once the vast majority of performance issues are eventually sorted out, it will immediately increase people's enjoyment by a considerable margin. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching and feel free to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Also consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell if you want to know about my future content as well as support the channel. Until next time, good luck and goodbye.